Chancellor, thank you. It's truly an honor for me to be out here with you today. This is my first trip to Billings, and I'd like to thank all the members of MSUD and the Billings community for the warm welcome I've received since I've been out here. It seems to me when I was preparing for this, you kind of think about those different events in your life, and it seems like every generation has certain events that define it. You look at the greatest generation, they had Pearl Harbor. Other generations had the assassinations of JFK or Martin Luther King, whatever they might be. For me, my generation, we could all tell you exactly where we were when the Challenger exploded. That was something that we thought was kind of like the defining event. We'll get there. Maybe we won't. We'll be with you in 1 second. We actually did pre-flight this to make sure it worked just right. So for us, ended up on 9/11, and something that I was thinking about when you talk about these defining moments. It's something I've never really stopped and thought about a whole lot. I was thinking about on the plane ride out, and it's funny when you're in the middle of one of those. It's not a defining moment to you there. It's bad. There's a lot of things going on, and you're very busy. And there's a lot of tasks that you have to take care of, and it's not till later, that you can step back and get some perspective on really, how large the event was. So to me, it was just, it's something that I thought was strange. I hadn't really thought about it before, but when you're in the middle of that, with like in this picture, when we first, got on scene. There's just so much to do and so much to take in and so much information that you have to work through that you're too busy to really think about the magnitude of what you're dealing with at the time. So today I'd like to talk to you about my view of the events that day. It says Lieutenant Colonel Timothy Duffy because I was Lieutenant Colonel at the time, so we kind of left it at that. I was the flight lead with the 102nd Fighter Wing out of Otis Air National Guard Base on Cape Cod. And I'm just going to talk to you today a little bit about my experiences on that day. And when I talk to people, I let them know that this is just my view of the events of the day. So they're no more or less important than anybody else's. I've talked to a lot of folks that were on the ground and they have just some phenomenal stories. And I've talked to some of the first responders that were in and out of the buildings and actually were able to survive, and their stories are, phenomenal. But I had a slightly different view of it from the air that day, and how we were trying to sift through a lot of the information. So as I go through, I just want to tell you kind of what I was thinking and why we made the decisions we did that day. And then when we get done, I'd be more than happy to open up for questions, because I know a lot of folks end up having questions on, why we did the things we did that day. Okay? So to kind of give you a layout of, what we'd say our AOR, area of responsibility. You see where Boston Logan with the flights, a couple of the flights took off of. We were down on Cape Cod at Otis, World Trade Center, obviously in Newark, in New York. Dallas and the Pentagon were the other flights left from. And then up in the north, you see NEADS, which is the Northeast Air Defense Sector. That's the sector for NORAD. So that's what normally controls the alert jets that are in their sector. So those are the folks that would be controlling us that day. So I'll be talking about NEADS a lot. And that's what it is. It's part of NORAD. It's the Northeast Air Defense Sector. So that's what it looked like on the radar at 8:30 in the morning on Tuesday, September 11th. So northeast corridor, you know, as you can tell, obviously very busy. 8:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. The 4 airports around New York, with JFK, LaGuardia, Newark, and Teterboro. There's just a tremendous amount of traffic that goes in and out of there, and especially on a beautiful day like it was. And we'll get back to this picture later on. So now I'd just like to talk to you about my day and how this gets started. So as Chase was saying, I was an airline pilot at the time and also flying a lieutenant colonel with the National Guard. And I had come back from a trip from Tokyo on Sunday. I took Monday off, and then Tuesday morning I was going down to Civil Alert. And people always ask me, said, well, why are you on alert? What's going on? That was something that's normal. We've had 2 jets on alert for the last 40 years. So it was just something we do. It was kind of like a fireman going in. I was going down for a 72-hour shift and was going to be on alert for 3 days. So there's always 2 jets on alert, which means that they're in the alert hangars. We have 2 jets and a spare that are full of gas, fully loaded with missiles. The missiles are hot, the gun is hot, so we have 940 rounds, a 20 millimeter, which bullets are about that big. And we also have a spare. So if we get scrambled, if there's something going on with it, they're going to want us to go out and take a look at it. Normally our goal is always to be airborne within 5 minutes. So the jets are ready to go, they're all set, they're hot cocked, they're set and ready to go. So I get up in the morning, probably around 5 o'clock or so, was walking out to my car, and the first thing that struck me was about 5:30 in the morning. Has anybody ever been to New England in the summer? Yeah, kind of a little hot and humid. And when I walked out that morning, it was crisp, it was cold, and there was no humidity. And I just remember I was walking out to my car, and the only thing that came to my head was, it's here, it's football season. To me, that first, crisp cold day, that's kind of where I was. And as a pilot, the jets don't do as well on hot weather as they do in cold. The air is denser when it's cold, so they can force more thrust out the back. So the first, after a summer of hot, humid weather, the jets are kind of doggy. And you get that first cold day, like the jets are going to perform. So everybody can't wait to get down and strap on a jet and go. And I was a little disappointed because I wasn't on schedule that day because I was on alert. And that's all I could think as I was driving down to Cape Cod. There literally wasn't a cloud in the sky. And when we say it's clear and visibility is unlimited, or in pilot jargon, you walk in and say, how's the weather? I say it's clear in the morning. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. And so I went in, got to the guard unit probably around 6 o'clock, and went in, checked to make sure that I was all good to go. There were no regulations to change or anything that I needed to know about. And went into the command post and signed out my alert packet, which has all our classified authenticators. So should we get scrambled and should we get an order that we have to shoot, we have authenticators to make sure that it's coming from the right source and they have the proper authority to give us that order. So that's standard procedure. There was nothing different that day. So as we were getting ready to go, we came on, I briefed up with the 2 alert pilots that were coming off. They briefed us on what the statuses were of the jets, what we were doing. They went home and we assumed the alert posture. So it was probably around 8:30 in the morning. We had 4 aircraft that were going up for a training mission. And as they were at the duty desk getting ready to go, at the time I was the operations officer, so I was the number 2 person in the squadron. We had a squadron commander who was behind the desk at the time, and then myself as the operations officer, I was responsible for the training of all the pilots to get them ready should we have to go to war. And so we had four guys getting ready to go fly a training mission, and we're sitting there, and I was just giving them a bad time or whatever I was doing to kind of keep myself amused. And the phone rang, and one of our sergeants behind the desk picked up the phone, and he says, hey, Colonel Duffy, you got a call. And I just remember looking at my watch real quick and saying, it's 8:30 in the morning, nobody even knows I'm here except my wife. So I couldn't figure out who would be calling me. So I said, well, who is it? And he said, it's Otis Tower, something about a hijacking. Well, when you're in a fighter squadron and you're sitting alert, that's not a word you use. So as soon as I heard that, I reached down to my flight suit, pulled out the radio, which we call the brick, and I said, Alpha Kilo 1 and 2, suit up. So that was the order that I was given to go into the life support shop, put on our G suits, grab our harnesses, helmets, all that stuff, and and get it going. So as I'm running in there, starting to put my stuff on, my wingman that day, who actually was supposed to be the flight lead, his name was Danny Nash. He was a major at the time, and his call sign was Nasty, and it fits. And so Nasty comes running in, and you know he doesn't know. All he's heard is me on the radio saying "suit up." So he comes in cold, saying, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Looks like we have a suspected hijacking." I said, "Have you ever done a hijacking?" And he said, "No, I haven't." I said, "Well, I have." And right then he says, "You've got the lead." So I was going to be the wingman that day, but we switched over in the shoot shop where we're throwing our stuff on real quick. So I ran into the command post, and our squad commander was in there, and literally had a phone in each hand. He had NORAD on one, and he had Boston Sun on the other, and he was trying to get them to talk to each other. Because the call-out didn't come the way it should have. When Boston had a suspected hijacking, they should have called NORAD. Then NORAD would have got to us right away and put us on battle stations or got us alerted and moving. The good news was that since the call came right to the duty desk, and I happened to be standing there, we didn't waste any time. So we were able to keep moving. So what he told me at the time, he put both phones against his chest, and he said, "It's an American 767 from Boston to California. It looks like the real thing." So I said, "Okay, we're going to the jets." So I ran out, Nasty and I jumped in the truck, and we were driving up to the alert hangars where we have the jets. You can see up in the top left-hand corner, that would be a jet, one of the alert jets in the alert hangar. So we call them the barns. So we got up to, we're about halfway to the alert barns, which are only about a half mile away. So we were going about 70 on our way out there, and all of a sudden the radio went off and said, "Alpha Kilo 1 and 2, battle stations." And that was a great call to hear, because that means that was coming from NORAD. So now the chain of command is kind of back in place. So that made us feel a lot better that we weren't just kind of, moving on our own at that point. And battle stations just means hop in the jets, strap in, but don't start. So that's what we did. So we went up the ladders, get in, crew chiefs helped us strap in, and then we had to wait for a couple minutes. I don't know how long people ask me all the time. I'm not sure. I had enough time to talk to the crew chief, tell him what I knew at that point in time. So it was probably 2 or 3 minutes, and then the lights go off, the horn goes off, and we get the scramble order. So that came at 8:46. So we got scrambled on the same minute that the first aircraft hit the World Trade Center. So it hit at 8:46, which is the exact same minute that we got our scramble order. So we got started up and got out and got airborne as quickly as we could. And you can see from a timeline standpoint, a fairly well coordinated attack. I know a lot of people try to talk down on the attack. It was actually fairly well executed on their part. You'll see as we go through that, we have one plane that just hit New York City, we have another one that's well on its way, and then the other 2 are already in the air. So they had the timing down pretty well. They had practices, so they knew what they were doing. And the execution from their standpoint was not bad. So you have to kind of give them credit and understand you have to respect the threat. And we've been doing that ever since, looking for where there are holes and how do we fill those holes. So that day they caught us looking outward. The way we were set up, even on alert, what we were looking at is protecting the borders. That was kind of the thought from an air sovereignty standpoint, and we were looking out at threats. And I think some of our innocence was lost that day because the attack came from within, where we weren't looking. Since then, we filled those gaps very quickly. So they put up inward-looking radar so that we could track everything around the country very closely from an air defense standpoint. So that was a gap, but that was filled, like I said, very quickly. So we get the scramble order. We take off, and I am told right away, heading in 280, calling to flight level 290. So tell me basically head due west, calling 29,000 feet. So we're heading west, and we take off, right-hand turn, and we're accelerating out. We have three bags of gas, missiles, a lot of drag, and we're trying to accelerate and climb at the same time. So going through about 18,000 feet, Nasty calls me on the radio and says, "Hey Duff, you're going super," which is, I was right at the Mach, so I was just going supersonic. We're full afterburner, and there's regulations, you're not allowed to go supersonic unless you're in protected airspace, usually it's over water, because you don't want to blow out windows or, do anything else. For whatever reason, this is the only time I can ever remember doing this in my career. He called up and said, "You going super?" And I said, "Yeah, I got it." And I just remember making a conscious decision at that point, saying, "We're going to go supersonic all the way down. go as fast as we can. And, you know, when I talked to the 9/11 Commission, they said, so you knew something was wrong? I said, no, I didn't know anything was wrong. You know, nobody did at that point in time, unless the folks were down, you know, and saw the first plane hit. Just for me, the way I looked at it, I was a 777 pilot at the time. I had flown 767s. So the only thing I could think of, if it wasn't a hijack, then they must have a problem that's pretty severe because they've descended down, they're not talking to anybody. So in my head, all I could think of was if they had electrical fire or something like that, it would take out their radios and maybe create some smoke in the cockpit or in the cabin where they'd have to dump the pressure and descend down so they couldn't talk. Either case was not good. So I figured, let's get there quick, let's get our eyes on, and then we can figure out what we need to do from there. So that's kind of my mindset was, when we took off and when we were on our way down there, it was, what can we do to help? That was kind of my mindset. So we're trying to get there quick, get our eyes on, see what we could do to help the folks out. Obviously that changed fairly quickly. So we got airborne at 8:52, and you'll see some lag times from when things are being passed. Like the plane had hit at 8:46, but at 8:57, Boston's FAA is reporting that there was a crash into the World Trade Center, 11-minute lag. There's just a tremendous amount of confusion that's just starting to build here. So when you're starting to see the lags, it's confusion that day. And a lot of people don't realize just how much misinformation and confusion that there was that we kind of had to go sifting through. As we're going down there, I still think we're chasing American flag, and I haven't heard anything from the FAA on this. So I have my head down in my scope. You saw how busy it was on that first radar picture. I'm trying to pick out a contact from 130 miles away on a little bitty scope around New York City where there's 50, 60, 70 planes. Pretty tough, if not impossible to do from that range. So I called them and asked for bogey dope. And a bogey is an unidentified aircraft, dope is information. So basically what I was just saying is, where is the contact that you're trying to vector me in on? So they said, your contact's over Kennedy. So I said, okay, I was flying 777s out of Kennedy at the time. It's right down Long Island, and we'll get there. So we were going about Mach 1.3, 1.4 as we were heading down, and I still have my head down on the scope and trying to find out, find that contact, and I call again for bogey dope. So again, just trying to get, trying to see if they can keep honing me in on this contact that I'm going for. And when I called for bogey dope, they came back and they said the second aircraft just hit the World Trade Center. And for me, I mean, that's what it felt like in the cockpit. It was just like, second aircraft, what are you talking about? And didn't know anything about the World Trade Center. So as soon as he said that, I looked up and I could see both the towers burning. And I even called the NASA and said, tell me that's a cloud. Because there was smoke already rising from them, and there literally was not a cloud in the sky. It was such a beautiful day. So, at that point in time, you go, got it, we're under attack. And as I said, when I took off, I was going to try to help folks. And as soon as I saw this, you kind of flip a switch and just went into that combat mode. And you go, people are dying right now, so we have to make this stop. And all the emotion and all that other stuff, you just push it away. It's just focus on what you have to do. And people say, well, how can you push the emotion away? You go, you push it away temporarily. You're human, you're gonna have to deal with it at some point in time, just not now. But you have to stay focused on what's going on and what you can do to get better, or to make the situation better. So I called up right away and I said, okay, well, same mission. What do you want me to do? And they came back and they weren't sure. I got standby. I said, okay, let me try to help them out a little bit here. I told you that we had that training mission that was going in the morning. We had a big chunk of protected airspace. If you can see right where the two F-15s are there, just south of Long Island and then all the way up to Nantucket. And so for about 200 miles wide from east to west and about 70 miles deep is a big chunk of airspace that we get to use for training. So we can go out there and drop flares and go supersonic and all those things and not hurt anybody. That's protected airspace, and airliners don't go through that. So I said, I'll tell you what. I said, let me jump in the warning area. I'll be about 40 miles from Manhattan if you need me, and I'll be out of everybody's way. So they said, okay, yeah, go do that. So myself and Nasty, at that point, I pulled back on throttles because we had been chewing up a bunch of gas, and I wasn't sure how long they were going to need us to stay airborne. So we went in, started conserving, we went to max conserve on the airspeed, and just started doing a holding pattern. And I didn't even get all the way through a turn and holding, and they came back and they said, you have a new mission, proceed direct to Manhattan, set up a combat air patrol. So I authenticated, made sure that was a valid order to give us. And now you start thinking, okay, this has never been done before. We've never set up a combat air patrol over U.S. cities. There's only 2 of us. We don't know what the threat is. We don't know how many, because they're telling us they think there may be 6 or 8 more. They just didn't know. Like I said, there was a lot of misinformation we had to sort through. And I only had 5 or 6 minutes to get a plan together and get it communicated to everybody. So as we're heading towards the city, we're trying to get cleared, get our flight path cleared, get clearance down, so we could start trying to assess the situation and see what we could do to try to control it a little bit. We were going in, and again, Nasty came back, and being a good wingman, and Chance was talking about leadership. When leadership doesn't mean you're the personnel front all the time. It's leading at whatever level you are, whatever you're doing, and being good at it. And Nasty, even though he had let me be the lead for this one, he came back, and the whole time he's thinking, okay, he's going through the plan, he's communicating, he's doing that, what else does he need? He said, okay, what's the next most important thing? Is fuel, because that's going to limit our time on station over the city. And he was a scheduler, and he had a piece of information I didn't have. Those 4 folks that were going out flying for the training mission, they just happened to have an air-to-air tanker scheduled for practice. So we had a tanker sitting out in that warning area, full of gas that they could pass to us. So he called up and said, hey, we have a tanker in Whiskey 105, which I didn't know. And so I called up into New York Center and said, grab that tanker, put him over JFK at 20,000 feet, we'll come get our gas when we need it. So now, instead of being there for half an hour, we probably had 4 or 5 hours worth of gas that we could keep going up and refueling, doing air-to-air refueling. So that was I was very fortunate for us that it was scheduled like that, and it was a great call on Nasty's part, to bring that up. So we get down and we get over the city, and the first thing we do is fly by and try to give our assessment, an aerial assessment of the towers. Kind of a hard thing to watch. I have to say, very surreal. It's it's one of those things that whole flight seemed like like I was in the middle of a bad B movie. Like it's just like it shouldn't be happening. It's not to us. It happens to some folks, not us, not here. And being over the city, especially at one point, I know I escorted a plane down to land in Newark, and so I came off that plane. I was probably at 400 or 500 feet heading back to the World Trade Center, and I'll never forget, it's like burned in my mind. I'm looking through the Statue of Liberty at the towers burning, from just above the water. And it looks so unreal that this could be happening. But it was, and you have to focus on what's going on. So we went down and we spent the next 5 hours or so intercepting planes, and either escorting them to land or turning them away from the airspace. And some of the folks, there was a lot of private pilots out there, and they were flying, they saw some commotion, they were just kind of curious and kind of drifting down to see what was going on. Not the right day to do that. So we had an F-15 pull up beside them and turn them away pretty quick, which got their attention, which was a good call for them. I'm about to say, while I'm out there, it's funny, the timing that I looked at. So we were actually on station on cap at 9:27. My timing goes with the towers. I don't know, people always ask me, well, what time did this happen? What time did that? I have no idea. We were really busy. And I kind of put my whole day in relation to what was going on with the towers. So we got on, we checked the towers. I know at some point in time, they came on and they said, we have the same problem going down in Washington. And, again, another distractor. So the first thing in mind, that runs through is, okay, how many other cities is this going to happen in? And you're like, okay, there's nothing I can do about that. So once again, it's focus, focus back on what you have to get done. So we continue to intercept in the planes, trying to get everybody down. There was a great call that I believe it was the Secretary of Transportation made it, but I'm not sure. That as soon as this happened, they did a ground stop on all the planes, so nobody else started taking off. And then they executed a plane that's called Skatana, I don't know, has anybody ever heard of that? Okay, yeah, it's a kind of obscure plan that was, dusted off from the Pentagon from the 50s, literally from the 50s and 60s. And what it was it was a plan to shut down all the navigation aids in the country. So if there was ever a big launch from the old ICBMs from the Soviets, we could shut those down. So you could shut all the nav aids down, they couldn't update. And even if they came and tried to hit us, they wouldn't be very accurate because they wouldn't be getting their updates from the nav aids along the way. Well, in order to do that, you have to get all the planes down first. And then you can shut the nav aids down because planes need those to navigate. And they were able to use that, so they executed Scatana. And it was to get on, the plan on how they were going to get all those planes down as quickly as possible. And it was a great call because there was so much confusion that we had to limit, the moving pieces on this. And if we don't know how many bad guys are still out there, we need to get all the good guys down as fast as we can, and then start sifting through what's left and see how we're doing. So it was a great call. I don't know who made it, but it was amazing the teamwork between, for us in the air with New York's radar approach control and with the Northeast Air Defense Sector. We were making up some of these things kind of on the fly. So it was just amazing how flexible the folks could be, how creative they could be, and just how professional they were. And when I met with the 9/11 Commission, that was one of the things that I tried to drill home. We met like 2.5 years later, and they were asking all kinds of questions, obviously, trying to get to the bottom of of everything, of what happened, and was there blame, was there not blame, and where were the gaps. And when we get done with the whole thing, one thing I wanted to tell them was that 2.5 years later, you can sit there with a cup of coffee in a boardroom, trying to pick through all the information that you have. I said, but it was amazing to me, even that day, how professional everybody was. I mean, people were just on the radios, keeping the emotion out of it, staying focused on what their jobs were, and everybody trying to look to see what they could do. So when we talk about leadership, there was leadership happening everywhere. There were folks that were just doing a phenomenal job. Probably the hardest part for me for the day was the cell tower had already come down, so I was escorting a Delta flight into JFK, and out of the corner of my eye, I just saw some movement. I looked over, and lower Manhattan was just covered in a big tan cloud. So I called up and said, hey, I think one of the towers went down. And they came back and said, yep, cell tower's down. We just got it on the TV. I said, okay, so I kept escorting him through. I had to intercept a couple more planes, and then they came back and they said, hey, can you go check out the tower, the North Tower? Well, I thought the cell tower fell over. I didn't realize it imploded. And so I went back and I flew right by the tower, and I called them up and said, I don't think you can do a rescue off the roof. Those upper floors were just, and if you remember, the North Tower got hit pretty high, and the top floors were just engulfed. And I said, I don't think there's any way you can get anybody off the roof. And so then I wanted to check the structural integrity of it. So I'm not an architect or anything else, but I just, rolled my plane up, at 90 degrees, and was looking down at the roof. I was just looking to see if it was twisted or leaning, if there was anything, that I could give to them from my vantage point. And, as I looked at it, it looked perfect. And at that point I said, you know what, the top floors are going to burn out, they're going to save the building. That's exactly what went through my mind. And I was just getting ready to key the mic and tell them that. And as I was looking at the square, it started getting smaller. And I didn't have any frame of reference for it, because again, I thought the cell towers fell over. And as I'm looking at the square getting smaller, after a second or two, I could see the plume coming out the bottom, and I realized it was falling away from me. And I got to tell you, that was probably the one time that day that I kind of allowed myself to be emotional. So for 10 or 15 seconds, I was horrified, because I was just about to tell those guys I think we can save it. And I'm thinking those firemen are probably rushing in there thinking the same thing. They're going in trying to help everybody. And for me, that was the hardest part of the day. Watching that go down. I gave myself 10 or 15 seconds, of that, and it's okay, enough, back to the task at hand. And just kept working my way through. So that's the picture I showed you earlier. That's what it looked like at 8:30. And at about 2:30, I was on my way back, so we had a couple more F-15s came up. They had time to give them gas, put missiles on, and do that kind of stuff, because the rest of the jets were all on training status. So they had folks, and that's one thing the National Guard does a pretty nice job of, is folks drop their day job, showed up at the base and just started going in immediately and, you know, putting up fuel tanks and slapping missiles on them and doing all those things that they needed to do, and did it quickly. So I took off at 8:50 in the morning. We had 2 alert jets that were fully loaded. When I landed at 2:30, they had 4 airborne and 8 lined up, fully loaded, 3 bags of gas, wall-to-wall missiles, and I mean, I've never seen anything like it in my life. And so that's what we had in the morning, and when I was going back to Otis, that's what it looked like. And it pretty much looked like that, or very similar to that, at 10:30. It was unbelievable. From 8:30 to 10:30, he got everybody down. It was just an amazing thing to see. And that was the Skatan I was telling you about.